Welcome to the Dragon Slayer podcast by East Idaho Credit Union. I am Steven. With me, as always, is Bailey. And today's guests, actually, Joe and Phil from SOVRN Creative. Guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Yeah. Okay, so to start off with here, first of all, why don't we talk about what is SOVRN? What do you guys do?
You and me, Phil. We are a creative agency, and what that means to us, I often have to define it, but brand is a big part of what we do, but we make all kinds of creative stuff, hence the creative agency. So from videos to websites to ad campaigns and all those sorts of things. But really what we try to do with our clients is just really get to understand what they're trying to achieve over the course of a year, because we don't do the same thing every time. So we just want to understand their challenges. Are they launching a new product? Are they trying to do a recruiting campaign or anything else? And just understand how we can best help them and figure out what they want to do, their objectives, their budget, all those different things, their timelines. And then we'll kind of help them figure out, here's what we think you should do. And it often results in some of those things we do, videos and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we do all that stuff in-house. And yeah, we turn 15 this May. So.
Oh, wow. Wow. It's funny, every time I talk to you, it feels like, I actually really like this and appreciate this. It still feels really fresh to you, is the impression that I get every time we talk about it. In fact, you said 15 years. I'm like, oh, really? It feels like when we talk, it's like, oh, 3 years ago we got going, which is just, I think, a testament to the energy level that you still bring to everything and how much passion you still have on all of it. Yeah, that's really cool.
I don't know about the energy level, but the passion certainly.
Well, you've hired some younger folks.
Yes, that helps. Yeah, that'll bring our energy up. No, it's been good. We've enjoyed the run, but I think that was part of what went into doing it, is just building a place that we wanted to be part of, and that would incite others that kind of had the same idea and wanted to do the same sort of thing, would get them to be like, hey, that's a cool place. We want to be part of that too.
Yeah.
And then have that kind of echo to our clients as well, where we're looking for clients that are looking for the stuff that we do and just the way we are and what we're trying to do, because I think you can enjoy what you do and have good relationships with people. It doesn't have to be something where you go in and like, I hate my job. And so far we've been fortunate in the clients we've had and been able to be selective about that. And we've had some great people we've worked with over the years. So far so good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome.
It goes quick. You know, you just, 15 years, you just, I guess, to the point of this industry, the creative field, everything's different that you do. And, you kind of just wake up one day and you're like, wow, we're still here 15 years later doing, but it just kind of goes by. So,
yeah, that's interesting. So I'm curious, is it more fun to work on other people's brands, or is it more fun to work on your own?
It's easier to work on other people's brands than your own.
Yeah. I would say both. I mean, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been rewarding to work on SOVRN's brand and because it is personal.
Right.
When we started out, we kind of defined exactly who we wanted to be, what we, how we wanted to work, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it does become a little bit, it is harder because you overanalyze everything you do. And, you think a little too hard about it, or you just work, even if you don't worry too much about it, I think, it's kind of like the cobbler's shoes, thing is, you're not doing enough, or, am I paying attention to it, or anything like that. But, it's a lot easier to do it for other folks.
Well, I think you're right. I had a mentor earlier in my career tell me, and he was kind of a gruff, like, he came from like a farming background, and he was kind of rough, and he was like missing some fingers and rough around the edges, but a brilliant man by all accounts. And I remember him looking at me and being like, don't fall in love with it, kid. Don't fall in love with anything, right? And that was one of the very first lessons I learned, is you just can't fall in love with anything. And when it's your own, it's real easy to like get your emotions wrapped up in this because it's part of you, right? It's part of you. And so, when you represent a brand and when you work on that brand every single day, you develop feelings towards that brand. Most of them good, some of them less good. Because you're like, why did we decide this stupid thing, whatever that thing is? But yeah, don't fall in love with it. It's been a good lesson. Like you have to be able to remain objective about that stuff. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back in time for a minute here. Okay. Um, so let's start off with how did you two get to know one another?
Good question.
Yeah.
So my older brother started an internet company in 1995 in Idaho. It was one of the first ones. And so I was getting done with my second different college in 3 years. And he said, "Hey, brother, I need some help on this stuff." And I'd been doing some website coding at the time.
Yeah.
So he said, "Hey, I need your help." And so that's how I got into this business and started helping with him. A kid he went to college with knew someone that was going to Boise State University in their design program, and we did not have a designer at the time. So he wanted to have an internship. And so we brought this guy in, and that turns out to be Brian Cottier, who's our third business partner.
Mhm.
So I met Brian, that was probably about 27 years ago, and he and I have worked together ever since. And I met Phil probably, I don't know, a couple months later.
And where is Brian today? I'm pretty sure we invited him, didn't we?
Well, he saw that there was only 2 microphones, so he very kindly said, "You know what? Why don't you two?"
Something like that.
He doesn't like to show the spotlight.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm just kidding. We talked to him earlier. And
Yeah.
it was funny. But.
Yeah. But anyway, Brian and Phil were going to school at Boise State together in their
Mhm.
design program. And so I met Phil one evening at a restaurant that's now closed, and have known him for almost 27 years now. And we hooked back up work-wise because we'd kind of see each other at industry events and at concerts a lot. We share a
Mhm.
lot of the same music tastes. In fact, the three of us went to see Modest Mouse. They had a 20-year anniversary
really?
for what was the album? Not Lonesome Crowded West.
Yep.
Was it? Yeah, Lonesome Crowded West.
Mhm.
So it's
I was going to
Spokane
guess
and watched
ABBA
it.
or something like that.
No, I would have seen Audible too. But, so yeah, we'd see each other a lot. But then in probably 2005, Brian hired you at the place he and I were working at, and so then we kind of started working together then.
Mm-hmm. So you're working together 15 years ago, the fateful day you start SOVRN. How did that decision happen? How did you guys decide to start this thing?
Well, I know personally, I was at a point in my career where I wasn't really enjoying some of the elements of work. So I felt like I'd earned a lot of good experiences. I was enjoying my craft, but I'd come to realize that the folks in charge of the organization I was working with had a different idea, and it's their business, not mine. So once I kind of realized that, I said, okay, well, I have different feelings about this. So I knew I wasn't going to be there. I didn't know what I was going to do, but so that's kind of where I was at. I know Brian, since he's not here, he and I would share similar stories of where we're at. Just, our kids are similar ages. And so we were kind of having that same sort of thing, and then eventually looped, Phil into the conversation. And lo and behold, he'd been thinking the same thing. Like, I don't think this is it. And the three of us just kind of talked about, okay, what is next? And we talked to some other folks along the way, like, because we didn't know what we were doing yet, but independently and collectively started to say, okay, I think this is what we want to create. And I think we spent probably about a year talking about what it could be, what are the pros and cons, what if this goes wrong, what if this happens, and I think that really benefited us, so that by the time we did open our door, it was great. And we talked about all these scenarios. Although I will say the one that we did not talk about was, well, what if it works?
Well, and also
and there's some interesting risks in that too. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Phil.
I was just going to say, we started talking about it in 2007. And so by the time we walked out the door, it was 2008.
Yeah, which perfect timing, right?
Yeah. And so we were, just dumb enough to.
Yeah, what happened in 2008, Phil? Was there a crash of some kind?
Yeah, we were, I don't know what the word is, but we left with no clients, nothing but an idea, and the worst possible time you could probably do something. And
But I
There
think
we
it was a
are.
good it turned out it was a good time. A lot of organizations were changing their relationships with big, large agencies, and there was a
Yeah,
lot of turmoil.
yeah.
And so people still needed to do things. And I think while we didn't walk with clients, there were a lot of organizations that were looking for what we had. We had kind of a more contemporary offering, certainly at the time,
Mm,
with video and technology being a big part of our
yeah.
services in
Very
house.
unique, yeah,
Yeah, certainly at the time it
at
was
the
very unique.
time,
It's still
yeah.
a little bit in terms of how what I feel our technical and video capabilities are that are in house.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a good time for us, and I mean, I don't know. I think we had a really good runway and plan for. I think we planned about 6 months of not getting a dollar in that
Mhm.
we would give it, and it we got a client like the first day.
Wow.
So, because people knew of us
Yeah.
and
You had a
we had a good
network. Yeah.
reputation. Yeah, and they're like, "Hey, we're really excited about what you guys are trying to do." And so, and that was fortunate, but we've had a really good referral, word of mouth. That's how we've gotten most of our business over the years, and it's still
Mm.
pretty effective as of even today.
Yeah, incredible. Okay, so I wanna go give us a view into some of these early conversations, that year where you were talking about it. What are all the things that you said, "Ah, this could happen or that could happen?" Because a lot of people are, and a lot of our listeners they're gonna go start a business at some point in their life, or they just have. What kinds of things did you talk about? What kinds of things did you wish you would have talked about? What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's following in your footsteps there?
The stuff I wish that we would have talked about more was, like I said, what if it works?
Yeah.
What does that look like? What are we trying to, that whole conversation. I think that's important to think about.
Yeah.
Scenarios, I think it's a really good exercise to do. Like,
Mm.
what if this happens? Or you can spend a lot of time on that. And I think that's important because we talked about, what if one of us gets divorced? What if one of
Yeah.
us wants to leave? All those things. Because if you don't talk about how things can go wrong, then they're catastrophic when they happen,
That's right.
right? So
Yeah.
because we talked about all the things that, well, what if this happens? And that was really good. I think even exploring, how viable could the business be?
Mm.
Who would we want to work with? A lot of those things, like it's good. It's fun to talk about the exciting things,
Yeah.
but it's important to talk about the things like, well, what might happen in these given scenarios,
Yeah.
and that's really the best advice I can think because we had a good attorney, we had a good accountant, and those are important parts to have because that's
Sure.
not in our backgrounds.
Right.
But just talking about the things like, we don't want it to happen. It's like, you may not want it to happen, but talk about it, and then you don't have to.
Yeah.
We already know what will happen if that happens. We've already talked about it. We know exactly what the plan is. That pulls a lot of pressure, I think, off of
Yeah.
going in business together because Phil's a good friend of mine. Brian's a great friend of mine. So
Mhm.
both these guys have been around forever, and it's like I don't want that to impact the friendship. So deciding to go into business together was like, well, we don't want to. We still want to be friends, and
Yeah.
like I said, we just went and bought a spouse. So I think we are still good friends, and
Mhm.
but I think that's really assisted because we've talked about what if these things go wrong? What if,
Yeah.
one of us wants to leave or all those things? And, because eventually something's going to happen. And
Of
so
course.
we've talked about that stuff. And I think that's the best advice I can give is don't avoid things that could happen because, and we hope they don't, but we've sure had those conversations.
Sure. Yeah. Do you put on, like, "Now we're at work" hat, and then does that come off and now we're friends? Or, like, how do you manage that? Because a lot of people go into business with friends only to realize that you were better friends than you were business partners. How do you manage kinda the friendship side versus the business partner side?
At East Idaho Credit Union, we're changing the future of business with our Velocity Money Market account. You can receive unbeatable returns on tiered interest rates. We have rates up to 2.02% annual percentage yield. East Idaho Credit Union puts local businesses first because when you do better, we all do better. Federally insured by the NCUA.
Do you put on, like, "Now we're at work" hat, and then does that come off and now we're friends? Or, like, how do you manage that? Because a lot of people go into business with friends only to realize that you were better friends than you were business partners. How do you manage kinda the friendship side versus the business partner side?
I wouldn't say that we put on different hats when we
No, I was
Fair
just going to
enough.
say that.
well, I mean, I think the important part is, especially anybody that's thinking about doing it with a friend,
Yeah.
I think like Joe mentioned, the most important thing was that, hey, if things go south, we're still going to be friends. I'm not, we don't let this endeavor, kill our friendships.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so, uh, I think at work we're just, we're the same. We still,
Mm.
we want to have a good time together. We want to have a work environment that's, not, much different than everyday life, but we have different responsibilities.
Mhm.
And, I think we try to, hold each other accountable for those
Sure.
things,
Yeah.
but, it's still, we think we're a lot different, inside the
No,
Yeah.
office than out.
Well,
So,
I love that. Yeah, that's a
yeah.
good thing.
we're not. I think the other thing is we're all really good at what we do,
Mm.
and that's not just my two partners, but the whole team is. And I think that really helps because there's a lot of people that I like being around,
Mm.
and not very many of those would I go into business with.
Yeah, I agree.
And that was the big thing we talked about is, Phil and Brian are two of the strongest creative minds I've ever worked with.
Mm.
And I've worked with a few. So that gives me a lot of confidence that they're really good at what they do. Cause I don't need, I don't have enough time to spend with the friends I have. So I'm not looking to say, well, I need to,
Yeah.
but I think that's a big part of that is being effective and really, really good at what you do. That makes it easier to not have to be someone different. Oh, I'm at work. I have to be a different person. I mean,
yeah.
for me, for better or for worse, what you see is what you get. I'm
Sure.
exactly what you think I am, probably.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think for anybody out there that's thinking about, a partnership or something, they're not just going into business by themselves. Like, the plan is to succeed. So you gotta approach it like a marriage. I
Mhm.
mean, you're gonna go through thick and thin,
Mhm.
and there's gonna be tough moments and
It's not
tough
always
things. And
fun.
so, the more you can understand what this person is in it for
Mm.
and understand that, then, and as long as you're aligned on those goals, and then hopefully you got somebody that has your back, really.
Yeah.
Because you'll need that, especially if you're around for 15
Yeah,
years.
of course.
You're going to see all those things,
Yep.
and it's important to have that kind of support.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And one of the things that I see with you guys, because I kind of knew a little bit of that story, kind of how you guys got to know each other, is I get to see this um, kind of mutual respect and confidence in one another that you have, which is cool to watch, right? And that's really what I think you need in a business partner is somebody that you're like, I know that they got me even when I mess something up here. Like they're gonna come pick up the pieces. If I can't be at something, they're gonna take care of it. And vice versa. You're gonna do that for each other and show up for each other.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, which is cool to watch with you guys. Okay, so you start SOVRN, you get a client the first day. Congratulations. Yeah. So what happens after that? What Yeah, that's right. Did you have like a moment where you like opened a bottle of whiskey and you're like, "Gentlemen, it's real. It's a real thing. We did it."
There might have been 3 or 4 of
I,
those.
I do. We do have a photograph where somehow Brian had gotten a mini bottle of Jägermeister. And our first check, there's a picture in this building actually against the brick wall of the two of these jokers, and that check that I took, and then they did the Jägermeister to celebrate.
Yeah.
So,
There you go.
yeah.
That's funny. It's good to celebrate those wins, right? Especially,
Yeah.
I think, early on. So, okay, you get first client. How does the next like year develop? What does that look like? You said you gave it kind of 6 months, where you're like, it's okay if we don't make any money the first 6 months. How did that first year play out?
Well,
Not quite like we thought, but a lot of the things that we talked about, like, well, what if it does this? I mean, it was not too far from what we thought. I think the biggest challenge was just getting new business because we weren't going to get
Yeah.
just referral business. We
Right.
knew at some point we had to go out and advertise ourselves, market ourselves, some of those things. We couldn't really show previous work.
Right, because you didn't have any.
Didn't have any.
Yeah.
Did show a reel of some kind in our previous employer, despite having all the verbiage on there saying, clearly stating this was done at a different
Yeah.
organization. They still came after us after
Oh,
giving us a
goodness.
hero's send off effectively. And, but such is how it goes.
It is. It is. Yeah.
So that was kind of we weren't sure how that was going to go. And that,
Mm.
was always a challenge to say, well, how are you going to convince someone, how are you going to earn their trust to do business with them when, well, what do you know? And so
You're
that
like,
was,
I promise we're really smart. I promise. Yeah.
I make no such promise that I'm smart. But that was kind of I would say the biggest unknown, but I'm trying to think of the other projects we got. But we were busy early, which kind of
Yeah.
helps take your mind out. You're like, all right, cool. We do have things to do.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, we were just, financially, we were super conservative.
Yeah.
We did things on a shoestring, and every bit of money that we came in, that came in the door, we just said, okay, well, this will last us for this long. If
Mm.
we can, this means we can pay rent this many months.
This much runway is what we get from this one. Yeah.
Pretty much. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't even know if like I don't I don't remember when we started paying ourselves. Like we just banked it, and
Yeah.
Spoiler
we
alert,
were
Phil.
we were
We
lucky
paid
enough.
ourselves before 6 months.
Right. Yeah.
Oh.
No, we
did. We were
did okay.
successful and
Yeah.
continued to be. But to his point, I think that's that's an important thing is because we had revenue. It wasn't me like, all right, cool, let's just split this into thirds and take
Right.
it all.
Yeah.
Like,
That's not how that works.
not what we did. We
Yeah.
started paying ourselves, but it was not like,
Very little money.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're making it big.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
always tried to keep a certain amount in the bank. That means,
Yeah.
if no business came in, we're gonna be good for another 6 months or so,
Right.
and then after that, then then we'd adjust. But
Mm-hmm.
just being conservative and
Mm-hmm.
saving our pennies and trying to do the best we could. None of us went to school for business. So.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we just kind of did what we thought was right along the way, and
Yeah.
it was our other skills that were what people were going to hire us for. How to run an agency. I don't know that any of us knew how to do that. So here we are.
Well, there's a
Yeah.
difference in doing the work and running the business. Those
Yeah.
are two really different skill sets. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we felt really strong about what we knew as
Mhm.
far as our product or what we could deliver people. But, we just figured the rest out along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So
What was the hardest thing in that first year? What was the most difficult thing to overcome?
First year, I don't know. I don't know if there's like a hardest thing. Like I remember we were busy, and once it's your own organization, you have to think about it's going to reflect on you. But that's the stuff we'd already been doing, so I wasn't
Yeah.
worried about not delivering a product and disappointing someone that way, or getting into a contract dispute. Like we'd been doing this, so that really wasn't a risk. And because we got work so
Mhm.
early, and we got enough work that wasn't a problem. That can definitely be a challenge. Like
Yeah.
we envisioned that being like, okay, we're not going to get work,
Yeah.
and planned on that. But again, that's why you talk about and plan for some of the things that could happen, so that I'm glad that didn't happen, and we did get projects.
Right.
So that took a big thing that could be a big challenge for people
Yeah.
immediately off the table.
Yeah.
I would say that the first year wasn't the hardest. I would say, or at least the tougher years were like 2 or 3 years into it.
Mm.
Because, I think we did run. So, when it was just the three of us, we can do what we want, and we can, we don't have anybody else to worry about once we start hiring people. Then
Mm.
that really, at least for me personally, those were where, the sleepless nights started
Interesting.
to appear, where you're responsible for somebody's livelihood.
Yeah.
And, you don't want to, like, it's a serious decision for us. We've never hired anybody to be like, oh, well, we need some help. They'll be around for however long we need them. Like, you kind of join the family when you
Yeah.
come to work for
Mm.
us. And so that that was the more stressful part. And then of course, you know, you get more people, more money, more, you know, overhead, you know,
Of
so
course, yeah.
that's when the stress started. When it was the three of us the first year,
Not
it
so
was
bad.
smooth sailing, you know.
Yeah.
And
That's
okay,
yeah.
did you feel like the first real stress was like when you're like, it's time to expand, we got to bring somebody else in here? And how did you make the decision to do that?
I'm pretty sure that Brian and Phil and I were sitting around a fire, and I said, "There is no possible way I can do this much work again. We need to hire some people." And I don't know what the capacity would be because, you know, my background's in video and technology.
Right.
So, and Brian and Phil were similar in backgrounds in terms of design.
Yeah.
So, you know, not a lot of overlap for me. I didn't, you know, I was the one doing any video or any
Right.
development stuff. But that's where we looked at what work we're going to be doing. And, but that was kind of what prompted that, because we had to have enough of the thing. We never wanted to get too far ahead of the hiring curve and say, you know, cause like Phil was saying, well put, where you're now responsible for that person.
Yeah.
And
And everyone connected to that person too.
yeah. And we don't want to treat it like, oh yeah, we might hire you for a while.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I
Right.
think this is going to work. We want it to work.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of reasons that it may not, but
Mhm.
you know, we don't want it to be something where it's like, well, we don't have the business, or, well, you know, be just dismissive about it. And
Right.
so that kind of prompted the decision once we saw enough of the work to say, okay, this is how we think it'll play out. And then you bring someone on, and then, you know, you slowly grow. And I think we had, you know, I think we were 3 people, 4 people, 4 people, 5 people,
Yeah.
6 people, 5 people, 6, 7, you know,
Yeah.
and just slowly
Yep.
have slowly done that over the last 15 years.
Hmm. Hmm. That's interesting. Um, I've so I actually come from the technology space originally, and I was around during, it was like when we kind of came out of 2008 and the economy started to recover. The VCs and the private equity firms started throwing money at tech companies. We had this big technology boom, and they called them unicorns, right? Which was any privately held tech company valued at more than $1 billion. And so I worked at one of these unicorns, and they were throwing money at us. It was crazy. And it kind of, this strategy became, they called it growth at any cost. They didn't care what the profitability was. VC said, we just want to see top line growth. That's all we care about. We just want that revenue number to go up, 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 up. And so one of the ways that tech companies would do that is by just hiring a lot of salespeople, and hiring a lot of marketing people. And then at some point, these VCs realize that these companies are difficult to sell now, because, you know, they're, for every dollar that they make, it costs them $8 to get it, right? The math just didn't work anymore. And then, yeah, they were hunting those unicorns in the wild pretty quickly after that, and a lot of them died. A lot of them died. It wasn't pretty.
Which is, I think, is so funny, because the same thing happened in the .com
Yeah, yeah,
boom.
it's the
Because I saw
exact
that
same
in,
problem.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was when we were, you know, I was just starting my career, and so in '99, like,
yeah.
Herman Miller chairs for everybody. I just retired by now, actually, after 23 some odd years, 25, whatever it was. So yeah, it was crazy to see that, you know, and I imagine it's the same thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, 1999 wasn't that long ago. And
I
then
know.
all of a
We were
sudden
just
they do
doing
the
it
same
again.
thing.
We were just doing it
Yeah.
again. It was so interesting. But I remember like sitting in like a senior management meeting, and I forget who said it, but somebody was like, we got over our skis on this one, right? We went a little too hard, a little too fast. And I remember the guy's face. Gosh, I can't remember his last name. It's Martin something. Anyways, he kind of looked around the room kind of somberly and was like, and it's our fault. We knew better. We knew better, and we did it anyway. And that's always like, I was kind of still pretty early in my career at that point, and that really, really struck me, and that stuck with me. And I totally agree. You got to be careful with people. They're the one resource that's really difficult to replace when you get it wrong.
Yeah. And you know, I think that, you know, our size just kind of dictates, you know, going back to our brand and how we defined how we wanted to work, the kind of organization that we wanted to be, and not create a um, you know the type of place that we left, or another place that we just didn't want to be at, and um, of it, I think our size is kind of dictated by the type of clients that we want to do work for, and
Mm.
the type of work that's there. And um, we're pretty selective about that,
Mm.
because we want to know that our clients, our partners, are kind of invested in the same way. We probably vet them as much as they do
Mm.
us.
Mhm.
And uh, you know maintaining a good place to work, that I want to come to work, that our employees want to come to work. That's important to us. So, we're pretty aware of our brand and what makes it,
Mhm.
and that kind of dictates its growth, and its size, and there's maybe we could be more aggressive about it, but we're we've just never been that way. And our size is kind of dictated by, this is how many clients a year that come across our path that have something good to do and
Mm.
allow us to do what we do. And yeah, that's
You hit on something that I've heard you both talk about a couple of times, about being selective about who you do business with. This is interesting because a lot of places are just like, we're happy for anybody that'll throw money at us, right? Well, we'll just
oh,
take it.
absolutely, yeah.
So, how do you decide, yes, this is somebody that we want to work with, or no, we're going to pass, this isn't for us?
Well, there's enough, when when you've been doing it, been in the industry as long as we have, and prior to SOVRN and everything, that you just become aware of the red flags.
Mm.
New clients or potential clients will walk in the door, and you know
I've got a
say
good
s-
story for that.
say certain things that, hey, this, we've gotten good at asking the
Yeah.
right questions.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of how many red flags pop up along those questions, that you can tell that these guys probably either, it's a range of scenarios. They either didn't really think about what they really want to do, or
Mm.
or we're, they're looking for somebody to, they don't really care who does it. They just want somebody that they can probably direct, or
Mm.
it's a number of things. But there's just a few, there's a bunch of red flags that typically pop up,
Yeah.
that we can tell that we're probably just not going to be a good fit for this organization, for any given reason. But when they all align and people's goals align, then seems like it
And
really works out well.
it's important to watch for those and pay attention to them,
Yeah.
because we said for a long time, don't chase bad revenue. And I think
Right.
that's the big
Yeah.
part of where it's
Yep.
like, this is going to be a painful road. You see enough information, you ask the right questions, and you can say, okay, this is not a good fit for us.
Yeah.
And if you decide to move forward, and sometimes you may need to because you need the revenue.
Yeah.
And there has been situations over the last 15 years where we've taken a project where it's like, all right, we need this work, but few and far between. And, I feel really fortunate that we've been able to work with who we've been able to work with. We have great relationships with our clients. I think down the list, you can talk to all of them that we still work with, or for whatever
Mhm.
reason don't work with anymore, and they'll probably have some good things to say about how we worked with them, and just us as being good people.
Yeah.
The one story I was going to say is early on. I remember a couple gentlemen walked into our office and they had an idea. They were going to get rich quick, and I think it was
There's
this.
your first red flag,
What
right?
was it?
Yeah.
I always say it wrong. Acai berry, whatever that is.
Oh yeah.
What is it?
Acai.
Oh,
There you go.
acai.
I knew I'd say it
Oh,
wrong.
okay.
Thank you, Bailey. Appreciate that. But they had some thing they were trying to sell, some pill or supplement or
Oh,
something.
boy.
And there was certainly no shortage of that out there, but these guys, they were going to make money. So they come in and sit down, and Brian and Phil and I are sitting there with them. And the first thing the guy, I can't remember the guy's name, first thing he says is, he goes, do you guys want to make $1 million? And Phil looks him right in the face and he goes, nope.
Yeah, not the
And
way
then
you're
he
planning
was
on
just
doing
like,
it, that's for sure.
well, because the rest of his pitch,
Yeah, you messed up his pitch.
yeah, and he was, you know, we could tell. It's like, no, we're not. You're looking for something quick and dirty and cheap,
Yeah.
and that's the opposite of what we are. You know?
Yeah.
So, but that's the thing is, you know, we score our opportunities. For instance, like when we get a new lead, I'll put them in and I'll score them and say, how likely is this to land? And, you know, I got a whole method of doing that, but we do that. So in the event where you have a couple opportunities, you only have time to respond to one, you respond to the one that scores better. But you got to pay attention to those things. Cause if you don't, you're just asking for, this is not going to work out well.
Yeah. A lot of heartache. Yeah.
Well, and to your point earlier, I think that our size allows us to do that. And some, it's not like these, decisions don't come with consequences. We
Sure.
know that we're giving up, a sizable bit of income. But when you're our size, you have the flexibility, I
Yeah.
guess, to make that decision,
Sure.
and it can come a little bit easier. If you're if we were a 20, 30 person shop, which,
A lot of mouths to feed there.
yep,
Yep.
the opportunity to say no is not very much. You take whatever comes in the door and you get it done, and that's not a organization that we want to be.
Yeah.
Like it's fine. I'm not,
Yeah, sure.
but that doesn't fit who we're
Yeah, I think,
trying to be.
there's nothing in the world wrong with that.
No, not at all.
So, if you were going to give advice to somebody who is in a similar situation, you're telling them, here's how you vet if this is the kind of work you want or not. What kind of advice would you give? What would you tell them?
I think you need to be sure of your capabilities first. Like we've always been very clear on what we do and what we don't do and what we feel confident in delivering. We've never really gotten into other areas where it's like, well, we could probably do that. And that's important to know yourself and what you're able to do. Once you know that, then you can make sure that when you're talking to someone, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for your expertise. They're looking for the way you want to do these things. And that's really where your conversation should center around, is just exploring that. Like, all right, well, let's talk about how this might work and what you're looking for. Good example would be, we don't really have clients that come in and say, well, you're going to do exactly what we say. We're going to sit over your shoulder, do stuff. That's just not how we operate.
Right.
Some companies do, and not a right or wrong way, but you have to understand what that is. So that's a sign I look for, is like, oh, that they're looking to control too much of this. They're not going to trust us for what we do. So understanding how you want to operate and how you want to be doing business and how you can be successful will help you understand what to ask the client to make sure that that lines up.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then, you have to be willing to walk away from that revenue. Again, sometimes you can't, you need the revenue. Certainly when you're starting out, there's going to be other situations, you're making a hire. There might be times where you strategically say, we got to take this business, but knowing that, well, this is not the type of work we want to get, it's good to be open to that.
Yeah, we're going to have to suck it up for now. Yeah, just do it. Yeah, that's a good point.
Have you guys ever had a situation where you thought a client was somebody else and then you got into it and it was different? And how do you handle that?
Absolutely. Yeah, because we're not, the red flags are never 100%, right? You never know till you get into it. And, we've had
It's like getting married.
Yeah, we've had a, been fortunate to have a good track record, and only, over the years, I would say maybe there's been a couple, 2 or 3 that we just really weren't a good fit for. But usually, I guess if I had to look back on those tough projects and tough clients, you do what you say you're going to do, and you do it to the best of your ability, and it's still going to be your name on the product that leaves. And honestly, you just gut it out and you get done with it, and then once the project's done, then you can happily decline the next one. I mean, because usually if it gets to that point, it's a mutual, like you can,
Yeah,
you both know that this
It's in the
thing's
air.
not really working
Yeah.
out too
Although
well.
I do remember a project that I think is the reason you have more gray in your hair than you used to. And I remember at the end of that road, Phil, the client asked us, "Hey, do you guys want to do this next year?" And I was like, there is a 0% chance. And Phil's like, well, and I was like, no, we don't. And I'm like, dude, this is why you have more gray hair. So. But yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I have a pretty short memory on a lot of
Oh,
things.
I know. That's why I'm there, buddy.
So, okay, over the course of 15 years, what do you feel like are the biggest challenges that you guys have come up against?
Growth, not just growing, but understanding when and how, and if you even want to grow, and that's even the type of clients.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I mean, you obviously want to, for more success, we want to be able to do better things. I want to have more capable people than I was, and continue to add to the team. You read that a lot, and people say, "Oh, I want to work with smarter people," and that's certainly true for us.
Yeah,
We want
sure.
to continue to add talent to the team, continue to be able to offer better things for our clients. But you also have to figure out, well, do you have the revenue? Because again, we don't want to get ahead of that curve of revenue versus employees, and so we're slow to hire. It takes us a long time, and we have to be a little more nimble on that to see an opportunity where we find someone that might be a fit and they're ready to go. We have to be able to respond to that quicker. And I think we have been quicker at that the last several years than the first probably 5 or 10 anyway. That's been a big challenge to know, okay, when is this the right, because you can plan anything forever, but that will never line up perfectly for you. And some people are, well, I don't care, it's someone else's life. If we have to let them go, we let them go. That's not who we are. So because of that, I would consider that a pretty big challenge, just to be okay with saying, hey, we can make this work. And it has, but we were a lot slower for that. But I think that's been a challenge, to figure out, to make sure that you're ready to do it. You're not overstepping, but I think that's been a challenge.
Yeah, I would say maintaining what our brand is and what it stands for through, new clients, new employees. I think to, continually tend to that brand and make sure that it's, that you're paying attention to it, that you're still doing the things that, that you enjoyed about it in the beginning, that when new employees come on, that you're treating them well, you're making sure that there's a good work-life balance, just making sure that that you're looking after that, and that that's an easy thing to let things slip of how we do things or we don't do things, or we neglect certain things. You know Brand management, it can be if you're somebody that's concerned about it, and which we understand, this is something that we want to not lose sight of who we started, where we started out and why we did it, and and make sure that's still true today. So
Yeah.
I think another challenge in this, it's the Dragon Slayer podcast.
Yeah. Tell us about the dragons.
So the recent or the relevant thing there, I think, is as 3 owners, we're equal owners, and it's your company, so you want to have a say in everything.
Yeah.
With a single owner, like you look at something like Apple, like Steve Jobs is very micromanaged, and you saw everything, and you knew immediately it was Apple.
Yeah.
And companies like that can exist, but it's harder when there's multiple owners, where we're all very involved in the business, and that's going to continue, where we're very involved, whether you're designing or whatever you're doing. So, you want to have an influence on what your office space is, the work you're doing, everything,
Every
right?
single thing.
Every aspect of business. And from the initial day, like, that was very important. But as you grow, that can also lead to a lot of bottlenecks where,
Yeah.
oh, well, Joe doesn't have time to meet about this because he's traveling or he's doing this other thing. So let's wait. So
Mm.
you push that decision off and things like that. So I used to call it the three-headed dragon, where there was three of us,
Right.
and to make every decision, we needed the three-headed dragon
Yeah, that's right.
to decide.
All three had to put their key in and turn it at the
Exactly.
same time. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it was probably the 7th or 8th year we decided to formally split roles to say, look, we can't
Yeah.
do
It's
this.
too
There's going to
much.
be some things, and it's important that, every Monday morning we have our management meetings. So the
Right.
three of us get together, we talk about what's going on. We try our best. Like last year, we did a backpacking trip,
Yeah.
to just make sure we talk about the future, right?
Right.
And we're taking care of the today. But really, it's just splitting the roles. So, I took over as kind of the direction of the company and business development, some of that stuff. Brian took over as human resources and kind of the team, leading the
Yeah.
team. And then Phil took over as a brand director. And then, Phil continues to actively be a creative resource. Brian continues to be an
Right.
active creative resource. I am the one that gets to do less of a real job in my world is writing proposals and some of those things. But that was important. We did that. That was a big challenge because, like I said, I think it took us 7 or 8 years to get there. But
Yeah.
boy, that was a real improvement, because then
Mm.
we could go back and say, hey, here's what I'm going to do, guys. Here's my thoughts behind it. And it wasn't about not involving the other partners. It was just being more efficient and then understanding here's kind of where I don't need to ask. And then, okay, we're going to talk about this. This is a bigger decision. Okay,
Yeah.
guys, let's get together and chat about the implications of this.
Yeah. Interesting.
What
Yeah.
advice would you give to somebody that maybe is starting out in their company and they can't really split off, but they're feeling very strongly about, making a decision, and they both have very different
Well,
opinions?
that's a good question, and that's a real thing you have to think about. Like, I trust Phil and I trust Brian, and a lot of that has to do with our friendship and nothing to do with the business, right?
Yeah.
We wouldn't have got into business together if we didn't trust one another. And so that's a big part of it, is being able to say, okay, Bailey, I trust you to make this decision. You trust me to make my decisions. That's about the only way to do that. And you can't really second guess. A good example is Phil just recently went through the process of negotiating a new office space for us. And, that can take a tremendous amount of time over the last 15 years. I'd looked at different places and things like that. So when we do, our lease was finally up and it was time to move. It's like, all right, Phil, you're going to need to do this. He's like, all right. And it took him a lot of time. And he would involve Brian and I when he's like, all right, guys, here, I want you to look at these things, or he'd bring some things to us. Like, here's what I'm finding. And I'm like, good. I don't have to do all this other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just going to Phil saying, hey, here's where I want you in, but here's the question, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I trusted that Phil was going to do that. And then, fast forward to a month ago, we moved in. It's like, this is rad.
Yeah.
We have a great space. And I didn't have to do anything aside from, and I knew what it took him to do.
Yeah.
Which is why I was like, hey, can you do this? Because I knew I wouldn't have
Happy to
time.
let you do it. Yeah.
But, it's that sort of stuff where I could have been like, well, I want something with more windows, or I want something with less, But because of the trust, like you have to be okay, A, that you can trust a person, and B, that you're confident that they'll maybe not make the same decision you would, or not for the same reasons, but you're going to be okay with that decision.
Yeah.
It's very
Really good
important, though,
advice.
because you're
Yeah.
going to have differences of opinion on different things. And
Yeah. You'll
That's okay.
very rarely be 100%
but I
synced
think
on
that's
stuff.
ton of the value. Like,
That's the point. Yeah.
Phil and Brian and I
exactly.
are very similar in some ways, right? We all have a couple kids, similar ages, like the same music. We're at some ways very similar, but in others very different. And I think that makes us a better organization
Yeah.
because you've got different perspectives on things. And as we grow the team, that's important that we let those shine through too, because you don't want a world just seen through my eyes or just through Phil's eyes or something. And that's important that we're open to that. And, I don't know, I learned a lot from Brian and Phil over the years. So
Yeah. Yeah.
valuable.
I've always told people, just because you like it doesn't make it right. Right. Like I want the office with more windows. Well, okay, but does that really even matter when it gets down to it? And that's a difficult one for people to let go of, right? Like, I want it my way, and it's my company,
Yeah.
and so I want it my way. But
And everyone's got an opinion.
Yeah,
So
that's
you're
right.
going to be like, well, this is how I do it. It's like, great. it's not your decision.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I got to worry about.
That's right.
Remember when you asked me this other thing and I didn't say anything? It's like, great, you know, but being okay with that on the,
Yeah,
because
that's
the
right.
bigger things, like, and I said, that's what we have to continue to do is make sure that the three of us continue to talk about the future and to make sure we're tracking with where we want to be. Are we still the organization that we started out to be? And
Yeah.
it's important not to lose sight of that, but on the daily, just, okay, let's just focus on who's doing what. And yeah.
Yeah.
That's good advice.
So you guys are really, really good at branding and creative work, and
Thank you.
it's a piece of the puzzle for every single organization, right? How do they figure out their brand? How do they figure out their name, their logo, their colors, their messaging, all this sort of stuff? Give our listeners a crash course, really, really crash course. Like, what kinds of things should they be thinking about and evaluating as they develop those things over time?
At East Idaho Credit Union, we offer startup loans for emerging businesses to help support you in the early stages of growth. This could be for inventory, equipment, or other operating expenses. Almost all businesses qualify. Get started today by visiting us at eastidahocu.org/start, federally insured by the NCUA.
Give our listeners a crash course, really, really crash course. Like, what kinds of things should they be thinking about and evaluating as they develop those things over time? He looks, Phil, it's on you.
Remember when I talked about those, my decisions?
This one's
his
you, Phil.
decisions?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. You know, I guess the crash course would be if somebody was starting out and whether it's a new company or you maybe even got a company that's been around, but you never really done much brand work. Thing to remember is brand is about culture.
Mm,
And it's not the the graphic design you put to something, it's not the signage, it's not the logo. The brand is about the culture, and so that's whatever you're going to create, whether that's one person, how you're going to do business, how you're going to the really important things
yeah.
about your company. And so I think if you can start to define what some of those things are,
Mm,
um, there's a lot that can go into it. But I think if you just start defining what some of those things mean, it looks a lot like, mission, vision, values,
yeah.
SWOT types of, analysis,
Yeah. And
kind of
everybody hates that stuff,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but those simple kind of things that make you think about some of those things and what you may do, like those are important. And I think the biggest part for a lot of companies that we deal with that don't, most of them have never gone through a branding process or anything. It's really just that, the important part is that hopefully we provided something valuable on the other end, but it's really just that work of sitting down and defining a lot of these things
Mm,
because they've never done it. They don't know, when, we talk about like things like tone and voice and
yeah.
all these things that they're more just, kind of the recipe of how you build marketing materials or speak, that sort of thing. But they've never, it's all just in their head, and they've,
Yeah.
and then the company grows or whatever, or they even forget what's in their head, even if they're one person.
Right.
Oh, what did I use?
Well,
So
and it shifts and changes over
yeah,
time
it
too.
does.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does. And so the brand is that, brand isn't those short-term marketing objectives. The brand is, what does this thing look like long term? And
Yeah.
granted, those things can change at larger, lengthier milestones.
Sure.
Companies evolve, but it's really that culture piece that, you think about how you want to do
Mm,
business, how you want to treat people, what you stand for, the
mhm,
why you're in business. I
mhm.
mean, why is the most important question you could probably
Yeah.
answer for a brand. So
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would say, just to add on that, don't go through the motions. Like when you think about these things, if that's not authentic and real stuff, if it's like we fabricate it, well, we like the way this statement sounds. It's like, cool. If you don't back that up,
Yeah. If it's not
then it's not
real.
going to work. There's no
Yeah.
substance behind it. So
Yeah.
they have to, like, going through that process, you have to really make sure that the truth comes out and, you are in fact doing those things because that if they don't line up, then
Yeah.
you're going to show a customer that or potential opportunity that, and they'll be like, "No, that's not you."
Mm,
So
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, that's a really good point.
What's your guys' why?
Um, some of the whys were, I think when we were starting out was, our own happiness is one of them. That's, I don't think it's totally being selfish to do that, but we also um, wanted to create a place that was a creative environment, and anybody that was associated with it or came into it, they realized that. And, um, we wanted to help develop other creatives. Um, we wanted to work with good organizations and help them, because we came from, a larger agency that, you know, doing not really any work in the community. On a smaller scale, it was all larger, Fortune 50
Mm,
companies. And, we thought, we could probably help companies of a smaller scale, with some of this experience that we
yeah.
had. And
It's kinda like giving the big playbook to smaller organizations, which is
absolutely. Yep.
sort of Robin Hood maybe a little bit, right? Yeah.
well, I think your impact is felt more
I
for
think you're
someone
right.
that, and I don't think they necessarily have to be small companies, but
Yeah.
someone that that money is important to them.
Yeah.
They want to see something compared to like at different points in my career. Talk to many clients, and they're like, "Okay, so how do we want to do this? What are we trying to achieve?" They're like, "Just make me look good and spend my budget. Because if I don't spend this budget, I'm going to lose it.
Y
So I need to
right.
spend it."
Yeah.
And it's like that sounds really great, but it's horrible.
Oh,
It's like,
it's
no,
the
this is not
worst way to
like if you
work.
care about what you do,
Yeah.
and I do, and Phil and Brian do, and I think everyone at SOVRN does, and that's something where if you don't care about what you're trying to get with it, then we're not a good fit
Yeah.
because we care deeply about the why we do what we do. And you said, like, I think satisfaction, just like that is a big thing. It's not
Yeah.
selfish. Like
Yeah.
I could not have spent one more day at the place I left before SOVRN, and I'd realized that, and I was like, this is not working, and there is something different. And I think part of it too is thinking it's not arrogance. I think it's confidence and thinking we had a different offering, right? We had something that we hadn't seen in terms of certainly in our market, and we thought we could do some in the right situations. We could do it better, and
Mm.
that's part of my why.
Yeah, I always worry. Well, when people when everything is in the lens of, like, does it fit in the budget?
Mm.
And you have to talk about that, but when that's the purpose behind what you're doing, I always feel sorry for those people. That's not a fun place to be, 'cause what it really is saying is, "I don't actually care.
Right.
I'm just trying to do something and not get fired while I do it." Um,
It's doing just enough to not get
well,
fired.
but you gotta start with, like, I wanna get this thing done, and then you back into the budget from there, and, anytime somebody starts with the budget side, it freaks me out just a little bit when I talk to them.
And I think that can be easier on the tactical side of
Yeah.
marketing where,
Yep.
absolutely you got, kind of got to fit some things in some boxes. But, when it comes to branding and really taking care of that, shoring that up, if you, if it's a company that's never done that, I think that's that's money well spent. It's always, sometimes it can be, uh, there can be a little sticker shock on it, but it's also a lot of work.
Yeah.
I don't think that they, it really isn't just a logo refresh. It's really, if you do it right, there's a team of people doing a lot of work over many months, and it's an ongoing process. So I think, to really be invested in building a strong brand, you have to take that longer view of all the things that kind of go into it and constantly maintain that. And and those are things that can, sometimes be, it's not a postcard, or it's not a short little post for social. Like, some of these things can be, well, what if we start doing this, kind of like you're doing here with a
Mm,
podcast, and trying to provide something of value.
mm,
um those things don't immediately, show up on, the
sure.
return,
Yeah.
on investment. These are longer view types of things that,
Yeah.
you just have to see, does this add value to our organization? Does it help build this brand? And it's a little longer longer timeline.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so what's next? What's coming for SOVRN?
Don't look at me. Oh, wait. That's a very broad question.
Yep. Yep.
I would like to see us continue to establish good relationships with clients. Like right now, we've over the past probably 5 years or so, we've done a very deliberate act to reduce the number of clients we have because of how we do business. We don't have a product that we sell, so having more clients doesn't really help us because each client takes a certain amount of time. So I want to continue to make sure that the clients we work with, great partnerships, and we're growing what we can grow with them. I think continuing to look at the team and making sure that we aren't missing out on a capability or some of those things. We have to be watching what how is media changing, and what are some other things out there that we may need to add to another arrow to the quiver, so to speak. So I'd like to see that. I don't know. I think we have to think about the future of like, how long am I going to be worth anything in this industry if I am today? So, what are my plans? What are Phil's plans? What are Brian's plans? Like those are things that they get closer and closer every day. And so I'm hoping we have to deal with those right away. But, that's certainly something we have to think about. But I think just continuing to do the great stuff we're doing with the people we're doing it for, if that goes, then I'll be pretty happy. And we just had a gal start today. Her first day was today. So
very exciting.
Like continuing to have a great team to work with. Like that's, you said it earlier, like showing up at work every day. And, we've got 2 offices. I was just in our Helena office last week. And so, that's it. Every day is pretty awesome. Like I get to wake up and work with a good group of people that care about what they do, with clients that really like us, that we can have great relationships with. And so, I want to keep kind of growing that, whatever growth looks like. Like it's not a number of clients, but I don't know. That's what I would say. Probably a long rambling answer.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, it's interesting. You guys continue to talk about hiring the right people and having the right people to work with. And it's funny, we were visiting you earlier before we headed over to the studio, and I don't know, Babley, maybe you remember me saying this. We got in the car to come over here, and I was like, I just like everybody there, like from top to bottom. They're all just
I think
fantastic.
I said it first.
Yeah, maybe you did first.
Thank you, Bailey.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. That's we do have, I mean, that's all our company is the people that work there. And I definitely feel fortunate to work with each one of them, and every one of them is, brings something special to the table. Their expertise, their personalities, their, just their soul being, I feel pretty lucky in that regard.
Yeah, it's a great group. Okay, so Joe, before we pressed record, you mentioned that you had to get like your smart hat on for Congress. What are you talking about?
Actually, the hat has to come off.
Oh,
so I'm a professional
hat
wearer.
Yeah,
I'm on
I have no idea what's underneath that hat. I've
Not a
never
lot of
seen you
hair.
with that one.
No, so I in 2019 I got on the Intuit Small Business Council. Long story there, but they acquired T-sheets, and so Intuit wanted to have somebody from each state where they have a presence, and so for some reason they thought I would be good
You were the guy
to wear a suit and go speak to Congress and things like that. It's been awesome. The folks on the council with me. So this is because of COVID. We were on it for 2 years longer. So I will officially be done at the end of this year. But we've got about 12 people on the council now. So
Wow.
I have to go back in mid-May and wear a suit and talk to members of Congress, senators, and representatives and stuff.
Nice.
And it's awesome though, like representing small business across the country.
Yeah.
That's a cool thing. And so
Yeah.
I do my best to talk to different businesses, not even in our space, but to understand what are some frustrations and challenges so that I can go and lobby but
Mm.
for things that I think matter, and they certainly matter to me and other companies that I talk to, and then the other folks on the council,
Mm.
they'll do the same thing. And, it's been, so yeah, that's the smart hat I have to put
That
on, but I
that's
don't get to
pretty
wear
cool.
my hat. So I feel defenseless without my hat. So
Like Samson cutting his hair,
that's
yeah.
right. That's right.
So how did you end up on this thing? How did that happen?
So there was a gal from T Sheets that I was talking with to do some potential video work with,
Mhm.
and going through some of the demos that she was showing. She's like, "Man, you know a lot about QuickBooks." I'm like, "Well, we've used it for 15 years and
Sure.
have my own business, so I kind of have to." And she's like, "Yeah, she's like, they just had a call for nominations to be on this thing." And I was like, she's like, "Do you want to be nominated?" And I said, "Well, what do I have to, what's the commitment? What do I have to do? Like, I don't have a lot of free
Buy a
time."
suit.
Can I wear a hat? Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I would have
You
asked
should have
that.
asked that one.
Yeah. And so she said, "Well, I'll have the Eric, the gentleman that kind of heads up their council selection." She said, "Well, I'll have him call you." And so he called me, and it turns out, it's a small world. I was just going to visit my buddy at Washington State University.
Mm.
That's where I went to school. So,
Mhm.
this long story goes, and he's like, "Joe, I think you'd be great for this council." And I was like, "Have you ever really seen me? You think this would look good in a suit, huh?" Okay. But it was super valuable, and I think they wanted a good mix of types of business and
Sure.
sizes and stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't, whether or not it deserved to be on there. It's been valuable for me, and I think have something to offer. So
Who's been the coolest person you've met while you're doing this?
Lawana. So
Love it.
Lawana's she's in Virginia. She does government contracting, and so she's a council member with me, and
Mm.
we hit it off straight away. And so yeah, she's been pretty awesome to work with.
Mm.
Although I will say, all the folks on the council, not often do you get to talk to other business owners, and
Yeah.
none of them are really in our industry, but that's been super cool. Like our council, in fact, outside of the Intuit stuff, I've organized, so we have a meetup every month,
Oh,
virtual
nice.
one, because they're in different states, and
Right.
that's been super valuable because they're you get to swap war stories, like, well, what about this, and how do you deal with this, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's been pretty awesome. But Lawana Russell, shout out to Lawana, she's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
I thought he was gonna say, like, "Oh, I met the president," but the
No,
first thing
that's
was, like, another council.
no. I
Another
got
council member.
Jim Risch. I didn't get to meet with Jim Risch. I met with one of his lackeys, and because I was from Idaho, he's like, "Oh, let's get a picture." And so
Oh, yeah.
he came in and got a picture with me, but
That was
we didn't
about
get to
it,
meet
huh?
with him.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah,
that's funny. Yeah. They're all about the photo op, huh? All about the
yes.
photo op. Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask.
Our moving to Montana, maybe we didn't
Mm.
talk about that at all.
Yeah, do you wanna
That
talk
was
about that?
well, yeah, it's sort of interesting. So we had some consultants from the UK that Phil had been conversating with, and we brought them across the pond, and they sat down with us for a couple days because we were 9 years at the time, 8 years, something like that. And that was super good to get them to kind of just give us some input, and they gave us a lot of different tools and a lot of things. And so we talked about growth, like what are we
Yeah.
trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
We didn't put down opening a new location as a source of growth, but that was fresh in our minds. And then
Mm.
an associate of a friend of Phil's, that another person we'd worked with over the years, had been living in Boise, but he was from Helena.
Mm.
He reached out because he had moved back to Helena to raise his kids. He says, "Hey, I think there's an opportunity." So Phil and I went to Helena, which is only my second time in the state, even though I've grown up my entire life right next to it.
Yeah.
And we met with a couple potential clients, talked to a couple different people, and decided this is a pretty low cost to pop a location up in the
Mm.
state. And we tried that. Worked really well. I won the first. I went like four for four on proposals, and I said, "That's very different than it is in the Boise market. This is highly competitive
Yeah.
in terms of agencies, because we run up against video production companies, we run up against
Oh, yeah. all
technology
kinds.
companies,
Yeah.
we run up against agencies just because of our makeup. So,
Yeah.
everything is highly competed, and it's different in Montana. Not all positives in terms of things. You have to do a lot more client education and some things like that. But
Sure.
that's been a good way for us to grow. And,
Hmm.
we, the three of us, and then the rest of our team in Boise, we try to get to Montana as often as we can. And then the same thing with the Montana team, try to get the team there to come here. And it's cool. It's
Yeah.
it's a place, like I remember we opened that office, and everyone's like, "Why didn't you open an office in Seattle or
Oh,
LA
yeah.
or New York, it's like,
You're like, "Oh, that's an
why
obvious
would I
answer to
do that? That sounds
that."
horrible for me. It's like, no,
Yeah,
I don't, you know.
yeah,
And so, yeah, don't tell anyone, but Helen is a beautiful place and
yeah.
it's fun to
Your
visit.
You
secret's
just,
safe here.
yeah,
Yeah.
you told everyone.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so maybe let me ask this kind of as the last question. Then I know Bailey's got a couple, and she keeps looking at me to be quiet. But um, uh, what would be kind of the last big pieces of advice? Like if you were going to say, here are the three things, young buck, that you need to do as you start your own company, prep to start your own company. What are the three pieces of advice that you would give them?
I think understanding what you can offer and hopefully, I talk to a potential hire about this sort of idea, but hopefully what you're good at doing and what you like doing are the same thing. I think as a company, you have to really understand what you're really good at doing,
Yeah,
and that is your real offering. So I think
right.
being good at that, not trying to do too many things because that can really water you down. And so be sure of whatever your offering is, and it doesn't have to be just one thing, but be sure of your offering,
Yeah,
which kind of goes into the second part, which is be aware of who you're talking with for business and be paying attention to how you can make that successful and watch for the signs where you say, oh, this doesn't seem like it's going to good. Again, that idea of chasing bad revenue. Do
yeah,
not do that.
yeah.
Um, let's see. And then the third thing is, Phil, I'm nominating you for the third thing.
Hire Phil. That's the third
Oh,
thing.
yeah, there you go. Hire Phil. Yeah.
I don't know, in this industry,
Sure.
um,
Or any industry. It doesn't have to be
yeah.
specific to you.
Well, I mean, the reality is, starting your own business is a lot of work,
That's great advice, actually.
and
You're gonna
Number
hate it.
3.
You're gonna hate it, kid. Yeah, that's
well, you're gonna if you're gonna be around, if you're
Mhm,
not just gonna go under and not
mhm.
not do this in a year, if it's something you're serious about and think it's gonna be a long-term thing, then you're gonna have hard times. Just it's the way it is,
Right.
and you got to think about how you're gonna, whether it's people, money, whatever. You got to think about that a little bit, and I think right, too many people probably don't think about that enough, and they just think, oh, I got a great idea, or I'm good at this, I'm going to do this, and it's going to be smooth sailing, boom,
Oh, yeah.
and then
Hilarious,
and then the
right?
bottom falls out of whatever it is. It
Yeah.
can be totally beyond your uh, ability to affect it.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of forces at play, and there's going to be times when things are going to get tough, and what's the backup plan? You can't always have a crystal ball at the end, but I think the more that you can have some sort of a plan when things get tough, or what happens here, so that you don't have to make those rash decisions of
Mm.
I'm done, I got to cut, or I got to do, maybe that ends up being the case. But I think the more that you can kind of try to understand where the pitfalls may be.
Mm. Mhm.
It's not for everybody.
That's really good
Mm.
advice,
Well, I mean,
too.
it isn't like it
Yeah.
for some. It is like I knew. For me, it was like, all right, I think I'd earned enough information and experience to finally say, okay, I think I'm ready. Wasn't sure what it was going to be. Turns out it was SOVRN, but once I knew, it's like, all right, I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but it's not going to be for someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to
It's
go
a
out
special
and
breed. Yeah.
if you want to make a lot of money, go out and work for somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, there's I think you have to really want to running your own business and doing your own thing is you got to want to do it.
Yeah.
Because it becomes your life, and
Mm.
that's what you do. I mean, it's rewarding.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, I was made unemployable 15 years ago, when I started, because it's just um, either how you want to live, or how you want to, it allowed me, the lifestyle that I want to live as
Mm,
far as raising kids and doing, what, you know, and then you kind of work's always present,
mm,
but you figure out how to manage it and all that kind of stuff. But there's always something going on, and um, yeah, you got to want to do it.
yeah,
I wouldn't trade it though for anything.
yeah,
Like I can't see doing something different
yeah,
personally. But again, it's a very personal thing. I know a lot of my friends are happily employed, and
yeah,
that's great. It's
yeah,
not something like, oh, you have to do this. Like, no, no, no. You may not know what you're trying to get
yeah,
yourself into, because
yeah,
a lot of things that Phil said, like that's the truth. Like
Figure out
it's
why
going to
you
consume
really
you, so you better enjoy
Mm.
it.
yeah,
figure out why you really want to go
Hmm.
into business. What aspect of it is really what you're, what are you looking for out of this?
yeah. I heard somebody describe it one time, and I can't remember who, but they said, "Look, if you're doing it for the money, you're gonna hate it. You're gonna
Yeah,
absolutely hate it because the money, whether it's there or not, it becomes so much less of your life at that point because it's so consuming on everything that you do. You know, you go to sleep thinking about it, you dream about it, you wake up thinking about it, and if it's just about money and it's something you hate, you're going to be completely miserable.
Yeah.
yeah,
Even if you're successful,
Yeah,
it just becomes less important.
you hear those stories about, the baker that loved to, bake cupcakes or
Yeah,
whatever, that love that, and then went into business doing it, and then, just ended
hated
up
it.
hating
Yeah,
baking.
yeah,
So, there's definitely a part to that. I'm glad that, over the years I still love what I do.
yeah, yeah,
There's business things that get hard, but at the end of the day, I still really love what I do. I get enjoyment out of it. I I don't know what else I would do. I mean, I always have harebrained ideas of things I, could maybe imagine myself doing or learning, but the reality is this work is a lot of fun.
yeah.
You
and
know,
you're good at it.
well, thanks, but um, yeah, I mean, it's nice because it's always different,
Yeah.
and it's something that you feel like you can see the help that you give somebody, like, oh, I can,
Mm,
honestly, I can not really think too hard about this and really improve this and do a good job for some, with, you know they need a lot of help, so you can
yeah,
like, like, this is pretty easy to help this person or
yeah.
this client move the ball, right? And that is enjoyable to just be like, at the end of a project or, a new brand, to see this new, you know, life come
Mm,
into the world, and you're like, oh,
mhm.
that's where they needed to be, or
Yeah,
got them closer to where they thought to who
yeah.
they thought they were, or
Yeah, well, helping people discover their brand and how to express it, it changes them. It really does, and it changes the way that they look at the world and interact with the world. It's significant. It's
Mhm.
really important.
Yeah.
All right, Bailey.
What resources have been beneficial to you guys, and like what advice would you give to people to continue to grow while expanding their business?
Mm. I think being open to learn is important. Like, you may have a great idea, may have a great attitude and some things like that, but hearing other people's experiences, it's not about, oh, that's how I need to do it, but it's about finding, what about that do you agree with, do you disagree with? Like, I think this is my 28th year doing this, whatever this is, and I've worked with all kinds of different people, and I've learned something from almost all of them. Not necessarily a positive thing, but something like, okay, I see how this went wrong.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
I don't wanna
So
be like them.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think you just always be kind of studying every opportunity you have, because you're going to learn stuff from that. So just be your own resource and pay attention to what you're witnessing, right? That's a huge thing. Like, a lot of people say, "Oh, what are good books?" It's like, well, just read. Like, I
Mm,
read for fun, but when I have to read for work, it's like I don't enjoy reading that way. I like to read, Louis L'Amour books, but I just kind
I
of
do too. I
it's
like
not
those.
about did I they're great
They're
books.
great, yeah.
It's not about, oh, this is a great book or not. It's like, no, there is some wisdom in there, and you just have to find what parts apply to you. So, like, being your own resource is it's extra work, but like, it's hard for you to say, oh, someone else did it this way. It's like, yeah, but that's their life.
Mm.
They have their capabilities and their skill sets and their situation. And so it may have worked for them, but you just have to find which elements from like, okay, I think I can implement this and maybe make this successful. So I would
Mm.
say that's probably the most important resource, in my opinion.
Yeah, like if
Yeah.
Elon Musk wrote a book and said, "Here's how you be
Yeah.
successful."
Good luck, everyone
Yeah,
else.
I can't do that. Yeah, I'm not capable of being Elon Musk.
If you wanted to start an electric car company.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and I think some of that's true, but there are good things, you know, like we have reached points where, you know, you feel like you got to the end of the internet on how to, you know, find a solution to your problem or how other people do it and all those things. And, you know, there are moments that we've reached out to you know, other just consultants.
Yeah.
You know, this group Cactus, um, you know, we reached out to a few years ago because there were just
Cactus Consulting. Oh, that's a
yeah, it was
super cool name,
yeah,
actually. I like that.
they're this Spencer out of the UK.
Shout out to Spencer and Pete.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and he was a nice guy. Speaking of brand, like, so you know, I connected with him on LinkedIn, and he, you know, he just had a few good things to say. Though it's like, you know, I want to reach out to this guy, and
Mm.
he immediately returned
Mm.
my call, and you know, was really honest and said, hey, you know, when you get to a certain size, whatever, you know, give me a call,
Mm.
and we'll talk some more. And in the meantime, think about this, and this, you know, and you know, here's some books and things, and I always and they were helpful. And then so you know, we got to a point where we were like, hey, we need to we think we're getting close to answering some of those questions you have, and I think
Mm.
we're ready to take another step. So then they came over from the UK
Mm.
and consulted with us for a bit, and that was really helpful. I think you'll definitely get to moments where you realize you don't know a lot of things in regard to the business that you're
Yeah.
doing. You know,
Yeah.
you know the trade, but you don't know the business part.
Yeah.
And you know, SBA, all
Mm.
those kinds of things. Those are great resources. The
Other
Mm.
business owners. I think
Yeah.
that, like
Yeah, I
I
think that's a
mentioned that on
really
the
good one.
council, like that's
Mhm.
super valuable because, you know, everyone's gonna run into different scenarios and say, well, here's an issue I had. And it's like, oh, okay, here's how
Yeah.
I dealt with that.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, but again, just being able to listen and pay attention to what it is and understand that you're gonna have to figure out what that means for you
Yeah.
in your business.
Yeah. You have to interpret it and apply it
Yeah.
properly.
You can't
Yeah.
just be like, oh, well, here's what Elon did. It's like,
Yeah, I'll
well,
just do what
maybe
Elon
it'll work
did.
for you,
Yeah.
but it probably won't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's
Yeah, that's a good point. And you know what? I think on both of you kind of mentioned this is most people in the business community, if you reach out and say, "Hey, can I pick your brain on this? Can we compare notes?"
mhm.
Almost all of them are like, "Absolutely. I'd love to do that."
Mhm.
It's actually a very supportive community in most ways.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are afraid to ask because they think, "Oh, I'm the CEO of my company. I'm clearly a brilliant genius."
Right.
And you might be, but you maybe haven't experienced some things that some of these other leaders have. And
Mhm.
um, people are a little afraid to be vulnerable enough to ask. But there's great
The worst
power
thing
in
they
it.
could do is say no.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And that's, you know, but it's good to ask because,
Yep.
you know, there's a lot of information out there. And you're right. There are a lot of people that are willing to share
Yeah.
different things. And
Kind of a surprising amount
Yeah.
that'll go out of their
Yeah.
way to help somebody. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. Bailey, sorry.
All right, this is a random one. You can travel anywhere in the world. Where are you going?
Mm.
What do I have a unlimited budget for when I get there, or how's that work? I just get there and then I show up with whatever I'm wearing. Or...
Yeah, we drop you off just like you are, and you got to figure it
Yeah,
out.
right now you're going to the airport.
We'd have to go warm weather.
Mm.
I've always wanted to go to New Zealand.
Mm.
I don't know why, but I've always
Go visit the Shire.
always
Yeah.
thought that for
Yeah, you
forever.
can walk the path to Mordor. I think they did that movie there, right? That's where
I don't know.
I think you can go do all that stuff. You can go to New Zealand and like go do all the Lord of the Rings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they shot the movie there and it's
Yeah, yeah.
all there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would probably go somewhere where there's not a lot of people.
Mm,
Probably Norway. I think Norway.
I think Norway would be
Yeah.
really cool.
it's cool.
I don't like traveling much though. Like I love where I grew up. I love the state I'm from. I love going to our Montana office, but my wife probably wishes I would want to travel more, but I've influenced her more, so she's more in line with me where, when we're not working or something, being around a bunch of people is less enjoyable.
Yeah. I can appreciate that.
Getting old and grumpy, Phil.
Yeah. Just want to stay home and have my juice, right? Yeah.
Are you still going to the moon?
So ask the question. Pose the question.
Oh, no.
Go ahead.
Oh, if you rather go to Europe
Yeah.
or the moon. He used to ask this question to all our guests, but we just talked about it too much. But
Well, I don't remember where the question came from, but I asked, I think you and a couple of other people on the team, I was like, if you could get an all expense paid trip to Europe or the moon, which one do you choose?
You should make that Mars.
Make
it a one-way trip because it's a more interesting question because you get a committal.
Interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I would not get on a spaceship. I would stay here. But it's funny, you'll get a different answer because some people in a heartbeat, I would go to Mars, one-way trip, like you bet.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? And it's like, cool.
Well, and so I asked the question and I was shocked by the answers because to me, you go to the moon. It's obvious, right? You absolutely go to
Thank
the moon.
you.
No.
Yeah.
Disagree.
Yeah. and here's what okay, so what would you do first of all?
You'd go to the moon.
It's okay.
My first reaction was the moon, and
I
then
knew
I
it,
thought,
obviously.
but then I thought about it, and I was like,
No, you're thinking too much now. Don't
I
do
probably
that.
couldn't have a cocktail on the moon. There's no beaches there.
The whole planet's a beach. What are you talking about?
May not be
you
water,
just have to
but
be in a weird giant suit.
That's right. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, no, it's a toss up. Really,
It's a toss-up.
Yeah.
I've actually changed my opinion.
You
on
have?
Yeah, it's wild. But you won't be shocked why. So I used to say Europe. I have no desire to go to the moon. But now I think I'd go to the moon only because there's a really good content creation opportunity.
For somebody
true.
who manages social media, of course, that's the thing that they would think of.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So here's what I find. And this isn't 100% true. Most men will say the moon. That's where I want to go. Most women will say Europe. That's where I want to go. And I don't know why. There's
Can I
some
stay
interesting
home in this scenario?
I
don't want to go to Europe, really.
I asked the
Maybe
question,
Norway.
and Joe is just like, both of those are terrible. I don't want to do either.
That's one of those would you rather questions. It's like, yeah, I don't want to do either.
I don't want to do either. I just want to stay home and have my juice. Yeah.
I love it.
Bailey.
What's your message to the world?
Focus on what you can change. No matter what you do, sun's coming up tomorrow anyway. How about that?
It's a great one.
I don't know. Have a message to the world yet.
No, that's my message to the world.
That's a good one.
I hope they're all listening.
They are. They're listening. Yeah.
No, I just think while you think of that, like being able to focus on what you could change and stop worrying about all the stuff you can't. I think if more people did that, then there'd be a little less drama in the world because, I try not to worry about the stuff that I can't directly influence and then spend my energy on the things that I can influence. And I just that's what I try to do. And also remember, no matter what I do, that sun's coming up tomorrow anyway. So don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
I think that's a good message.
There, you can copy mine.
I'm copying you.
Ditto. This is message. Yeah. Thank you for joining us on the Dragon Slayer podcast by East Idaho Credit Union. We'll see you next time.
Woo! Oops, I hit my mic.